Well, it's 12:01 and we've got a lot to talk about. I know people are still coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for registering. I think this is a timely topic. We've all survived the winter freeze. I've heard different names for it, a blue norther, Arctic blast, all different kinds of names. And so now we're trying to figure out what to do with our plants in our landscape, whether it's trees or shrubs or different ornamentals, and then even some of our irrigation systems. We've got questions for that. So we're gonna try to answer those questions today. I've got Camille Wiseman, who's with the Texas A&M Forest Service. She's covers Williamson County, and then also Jessica Woods is from the city of Round Rock. She's the water conservation coordinator, and so she'll be talking to us about our irrigation systems. And then my name is Kate Whitney. I'm the horticulture extension agent here in Williamson County with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So we have a lot of good information for you, and we will also share resources. You can see the slides going through right now with some resources, and we are recording this, and it will be posted on our website, and I'll share it on our Facebook page too, if you need to rewatch it or share it with someone who didn't get to make it in today. So again, I'll ask you to be sure and mute your mic and turn off your camera. And if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to leave some time at the end to try to answer some of those questions. We do have a lot of people online today, so I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we'll try to answer as many as we can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Camille Wiseman. She's going to talk to us about trees and tree care after this. So let me stop sharing my screen. And Camille, there you go.
Well, hi, thanks for your interest in this subject, and thanks for taking time today to join us as we are working towards recovery after winter storms. My name is Camille Wiseman. I am a woodland ecologist for Texas A&M University Forest Service. And today my goal is to equip you all with the information you need to mitigate any damages that occurred during the ice storm to trees, and some information about how to prevent it and how to move forward from the ice storm. So looking at the landscape, you can see the devastating effects of the winter storm. There's broken limbs, there's dieback of leaves. It's really not a pretty sight. And our first instinct is, after taking care of our immediate needs, is maybe to evaluate the landscape, cut anything back that looks unsightly. And I want to advise patients before taking out your pruning shears and cleaning up. And I advise patients for several reasons. For one, the true extent of the permanent damage from the storm is not yet clear. And if we wait until bud break for the trees to bring their spring leaves, which usually happens mid-March or mid-April, that's when we'll really know what had permanent damage, what is going to recover. And the second reason is that typically the cleanup efforts after the storm is what can lead to new oak wilt centers forming. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in a bit. So live oak trees and evergreen species, those are the trees that have leaves right now. And you may notice that those leaves have turned brown, maybe even a pale color of green. And for those who are familiar with oak wilt, you may even recognize some veinal necrosis, which means the death of the veins. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here on screen 2. Can you all see that?
To try to prepare my daughter.
Oh. We can't see it, Camille.
Okay.
No.
One more try.
No.
Got that?
Nope.
There. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
There you are.
Apologies. I think after all these months of Zoom, hang of it. So this is a photo of a tree leaf that shows a little bit of veinal necrosis. Here's a few more photos that kind of show that the veins of the tree tree or of the leaf have died. And this is basically the breakdown of the cellular tissue that died around the veins as the leaf was experiencing freezing temperature. This is not a result of oak wilt, thank goodness. Okay, I will stop sharing it. Okay. So yeah, that's an example of what you may see after the storm. So new oak wilt centers are going to start when a beetle that is carrying the spores of the oak wilt fungus visits a fresh wound on the tree. And these beetles are attracted to sap produced by the tree when the wounding occurs. And this happens immediately after there's a break. So springtime is when the beetle is most active. Trees are producing the most amount of sap. And so the Forest Service recommends to avoid pruning oak trees from February 1st through June 30th. It is safer to prune outside of that time frame. And so we're still recommending painting every wound made to any oak any time of year. Typically, a tree will produce sap for about 48 to 72 hours after wounding occurs. And during the freezing temperatures, that time frame is significantly shorter. And the beetles are also not active when the temperatures are that low. So because of that, any wounding that occurred as a result of the weight of the ice on the limbs and breaking limbs, those breaks do not pose a high risk of starting oak wilt infections because of the amount of time that we experienced freezing temperatures. The real risk of new oak wilt centers arises as fresh wounds are made during our cleanup efforts. And so we know the best way to prevent new oak wilt centers is to avoid pruning from February 1st to June 30th. And because we're in the middle of this wilt transmission period, it is best to avoid making any pruning cuts until July. This means we're going to have to delay our cleanup efforts until we are out of the oak wilt transmission period. New cuts to oak trees should be made only in emergency situations during the spring. So this includes limbs that are leaning or hanging on your structures, blocking roadways, or if limbs are hanging in a way that might cause injury or risk to damaging your home. So cosmetic pruning can wait. In general, it's best to clean up the large jagged wounds in July after we have this risk of oak wilt increasing. And again, any cut or wounding to an oak tree should be painted with a latex spray paint immediately following the wounding. And this includes intentional pruning cuts as well as unintended mechanical wounding from lawn care or equipment or vehicles. So if you have a question about a tree being at risk of failure, we recommend seeking out an ISA certified arborist. That's the International Society of Arborists with a tree risk assessment qualification. They can take a look at your trees and distinguish ones that are at risk of falling and ones that are at a lower risk of falling. So in general, it is to the long-term benefit to the tree if they have to heal over a small surface area wound rather than a large jagged wound that often comes from storm damage. So again, it's ideal to make these cuts eventually to have clean, small cuts covering those or over those large jagged wounds. But now is not the time to do that on your oak trees. Trees that are not susceptible to oak wilt, which is anything other than an oak tree, you can perform those pruning cuts now. Although winter is ideal, after a storm, you make an exception. Pruning sprays are not recommended on trees other than oaks. And if you're unsure if the tree you want to prune is an oak tree, it's best to wait until the tree has produced leaves in the spring just to be sure, because there are some species of oak trees that do not have leaves this time of year. When you're making pruning cuts, be safe with your cleanup efforts. We recommend wearing proper protective equipment when you're working around damaged trees to prevent limbs from falling. Hard hat, chainsaw chaps, eye protection. Do not climb trees or ladders with a chainsaw, and never use a chainsaw above shoulder level. When you're making pruning cuts for these cleanup efforts, be sure to clean your equipment with Lysol disinfectant spray between working from trees. That helps prevent the spread of pathogens. And just a side note, oak wilt does not spread through the shared use of equipment from tree to tree, but other pathogens can spread that way. So this is the best practice to use. So the next, I'd like to share the screen and talk. All right. So when you're making pruning cuts, the trees again are going to recover faster and stronger if they're growing over the smaller surface area wound and if the branch bark tissue is left intact. So if you see this image here, this shows the raised strip of bark at the top of the branch and the trunk union, where growth and expansion of the trunk or parent stem and the adjoining meet, and they end up pushing against each other to create this ridge. Also, when you're making a pruning cut, you want to leave the branch collar intact as well. This will ensure a smaller cut that the tree can easily grow over. We recommend using the 3-cut method. This is used to avoid stripping bark down the trunk of the tree and causing a larger wound. So you want to remove the majority of the branch first and then make your final cut near the branch bark ridge and the branch collar. So you're going to make first this undercut here, and this should eliminate the chance of the branch peeling back. Second, you want to make the second cut to remove the larger portion of the limb. This cut allows much of the branch to drop smoothly when the weight is released, and any bark that may have peeled down during this cut will be halted by the undercut you made first. At that point, you're going to have a small stub remaining, and the third cut is made to remove this from the trunk here. So I want to show you examine the difference between these two cuts. And as you can see on the left, the tree or the branch bark ridge and the branch collar have been left intact. You have a smaller wound here, and the tree is able to grow over this in a faster amount of time. On the right is what we call a flush cut, where the individual making this cut wanted to make the cut as close to the trunk as possible. But as you can see, there's a significantly larger wound that the tree has to heal over. This is going to take more time and more resources. And so this is not the ideal cut to make. It's a poor, slow healing wound. And the cut on the left is the preferred method. Okay, so what you can do to help your trees out today. The number one thing is to avoid pruning oaks after the storm unless they pose an immediate risk of falling on someone or something. In general, remember to mulch trees very well during the spring and the fall. Adding mulch around the base and the drip line of your tree helps regulate the soil temperatures and also maintain soil moisture. And this really helps our trees out during the heat of the summer as well as the coldest nights of winter. And finally, have an ISA certified arborist on your tree every few years to improve your tree's structure and the weight distribution of the limbs. Trees that are not regularly pruned are more susceptible to break during heavy storm activity. So those are my suggestions to you. And I'll leave my contact information up here for just a moment if you'd like to write that down. I'm sure we'd be able to share some information in a follow-up email afterwards as well. There's a really great section of our website on the Texas Forest Service website called After the Storm, and it has a collection of resources for landowners that can be beneficial as y'all are recovering. So that's it for me. Thanks again for your interest and care for your trees. We really appreciate it, and we're here to help. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. I would be happy to talk with you all about anything we discussed today.
All right, thanks, Camille. That was great. I know we have lots of questions rolling in on the chat about that, but we'll try to answer those at the end of the program. So right now I'm going to introduce Jessica Woods. She's with the City of Round Rock. She's the Water Conservation Manager, and she's going to talk to us some about our irrigation systems. So welcome, Jessica.
Hey, thank you. So before we get started talking about irrigation systems, I want to just start off by talking about water just a little bit, because I do work for a water utility. I'm in Round Rock. I'm with the City of Round Rock Water Utility. So of course, I want to talk about your water meter just a little bit and water consumption. It might be a little bit too late for some of you if you happen to experience a water leak, but I made a little video. I want to start off by showing that just to talk about your water meter and your homeowner cutoff. So let's watch that. It's about 2 minutes long, and we will go. Oh, did it go? It did. Everybody, the first thing when trying to figure out if you have a water leak in your irrigation system is to find your water meter. And I think the water meter is an invaluable tool for you. So you're going to need to walk outside, walk in your yard. Typically, the meter is found near the street, somewhere between your house and your neighbor's house. I can't speak for every city in the county, but most cities do have a black plastic lid that you can either pop off with your finger. You might need a screwdriver to help get off, but it's going to be a black plastic lid, rectangular, possibly square shaped, and your water meter is going to be inside. You might have a meter box that has 2 meters in it, which would be yours and your neighbor's. We're here at my house. My water meter has 1 meter in it. That's the one for my house. And if we come a little closer and look at the meter, we can see that there's nothing moving. The red dial's not moving. Numbers are not moving. You might not have a meter that looks like this because not all cities have the same water meter. Some are digital. For the City of Round Rock, we use digital meters. So you would see a digital readout and you would just need to look if there's any motion happening, anything happening with the dial. Mine is completely stopped, which tells me there is 0 water going through the water meter. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is the homeowner's cutoff. So just north is what I'm going to say, or right above your water meter, there should be another box. It might have a hard metal lid like this. It might have a green plastic lid. I've seen both, but your homeowner's cutoff is going to be in there. I shouldn't say every time because sometimes they actually are here in the meter box with the meter. Not every city does things the same way, as you all probably know. But inside this box is my homeowner's cutoff. So what this is all water that flows through the meter, goes through this pipe, and this handle, this blue handle right here, is where I can shut off all water to my house. Right now, the handle is parallel with the pipe. If I needed to shut all the water off to my house, I'm just going to turn this. And so now it's perpendicular to the pipeline. That would mean all water is now shut off to my house. It's a really good idea to know where this is at on your property. And I'm going to turn it back. And that'll turn all the water back on. Again, parallel means that the water is running. All right. So we're back on me?
Yes, you are.
Right. I just want to say I wanted to show that because I know we have a lot of questions from people about where their homeowner's cutoff is. So I encourage you, if you haven't found it already, or if you don't know where it's at, go outside today. It's a nice day. See if you can find it. See if it's inside your meter box, or see if it's just buried under grass, buried under the dirt. You might need to have a rake or something with a hard handle and bang around on the ground a little bit to find that homeowner's cutoff. If you can't find it, if you don't think you have a homeowner's cutoff, maybe you need to have one installed, and that would be something a plumber, or somebody would have to do for you. It's not something the city's going to come do. I can say that just because it's on the private property side of the meter. But it is a good idea to have a way to shut all the water off to your property if you need it. So now going to talk about irrigation systems specifically. I have one more little video. But going back to the homeowner's cutoff, you may have to, after you find it, open it up, and then you might have to dig out some dirt, because when I originally, a couple years ago, I had a water leak at my house, but I had to like dig out the dirt and everything just because I had not looked at it prior to this incident at my house. And not all homeowner shutoffs look the same way mine do. Mine had that blue handle. Yours might have a round handle, very similar to a hose bib, something like that, or it might have more of a gate valve with just one big plastic handle that you turn. And it all really depends on the age of your house, what your homeowner's cutoff looks like. But everybody really should have one, especially for an emergency, just like we experienced if you had a water leak at your house. So now moving more specifically to the irrigation systems, I want to talk a little bit about backflow prevention devices, and I am going to show another short video. You might need to turn up your volume. My volume's turned up all the way if you didn't hear that first one very well. Here that one goes. All right, the next thing in trying to determine where your water leak is, my voice is not matching my mouth, so I'm just going to start that over and see if that helps. All right, the next thing in trying to determine where your water leak is, if you have a water leak, is finding your backflow prevention device. Now, a backflow prevention device is what all the water to the irrigation system flows through. It's not your house water, it's just the irrigation system water. Backflow prevention devices are always going to be found in a green, mine is a little faded, in a green rectangular box like this one. It's very close to the water meter, but it could be buried under your grass if the grass has grown over it. It could be under mulch, it could be under bushes. So you're going to have to locate that backflow prevention device, green plastic lid, and then pop it off. Maybe you can use your finger, you might have to get a screwdriver and take it off. And then be careful when you are taking this off, because there's always little critters, it seems like, in that box. Roaches are my least favorite, so I try to go slow and back away so the roaches can't get on me, but it could be frogs, whatever, ant piles. So I'm going to take mine off. And then the backflow prevention device, when we come closer, we're going to see that there's two handles on it. My handles have yellow ends right here. One handle, two handle. And again, this is where the water flows through to go to the sprinkler system. Turning one of these handles perpendicular to the pipe, again, will turn the water off just to the sprinkler system. So it doesn't matter which of those handles gets turned. You don't have to turn both, but one will do. And again, it's just grabbing it and turning it perpendicular. You might need a shovel if your box is full of dirt and you can't turn the handle. But again, this is a great thing to know where it's located in your property, as well as your homeowner cutoff. All right. Okay. And back to me. That's it with the videos, but I want to show again just a little bit more in detail, because it's hard to see inside that box what a backflow prevention device looks like. This is one that's obviously not in the ground and it's pretty clean, but this one has green handles, if you can see, two green cutoff devices. Again, it doesn't matter which one you turn off, but as long as one of the handles get turned perpendicular to the device, that stops the flow of water through the backflow prevention device, which then shuts off irrigation water just to the irrigation system. It doesn't affect your house water. So if you suspect you have a leak just in the irrigation system, or if you know you have a leak in your irrigation system and don't want to affect your house, find that backflow prevention device. Again, it's a green plastic lid. It's a rectangular plastic lid. By law, everyone with an irrigation system is supposed to have one. So if you have an automatic irrigation system, you really should have one on your property, unless your irrigation system was installed, I don't know, in the 1980s or before that. Again, maybe it's been grown over by grass, maybe it's covered with mulch. So get your broom handle or a shovel handle or something and bang around kind of near the water meter to see if it's somewhere near there. so you can find it. And again, if you haven't opened that box lately, maybe those handles, I've seen them corroded. I've seen them corroded up where you can't turn it. It's impossible to turn it. So depending on how often your city that you live in requires this to get tested, if it doesn't pass testing, it might be time to replace it and get a new one to make sure it works. I failed to mention back with that first video with the water leaks, I did want to show a water meter. This is just a very specific, I'm going to try to hold it really close to my camera here. But a lot of water meters, again, not in Round Rock because we use digital meters, but they have some type of leak detector. Oh, let me see which direction I'm going, but there's some type of, this one has a dial that goes all the way around, and then there's a little triangle. It's clear, so it's hard to see, but it would be spinning fast or slow depending on how fast water is flowing through the water meter. The one at my house has a star-shaped leak detector, as we call them. So that lets you know that water is flowing through the meter. On our City of Round Rock digital meters, the screen has on the top center portion of the screen, there would be an arrow that would be showing. An arrow would be there if water is flowing through the meter. If no water was flowing through the meter, there would be no arrow. It'd just be a blank square up there. So that would help you. And then we have some good videos on the Rock website about how to check your meter for a water leak. So now, after you've looked at your meter just to determine if water is flowing or not, you do want to actually check your irrigation system. And depending on what type of controller you have, I have a couple sitting here next to me. If you have, I just have two of the more common brands, Rainbird and Adventure. A good thing to do is just run a little test program or run through each zone step by step. But some of the controllers have a thing called test all programs. I want to say this is a Rainbird. Which one is this? The ESP. The modular looks very similar to it. There it's a more pink color than this one is more green, but it has something over here that says test all program, test all stations, test all zones. It might say test program, something like that. And then when you get
Jessica, you got muted.
Have I been talking for too long on mute, or
No,
just?
it was just for like 10 seconds.
Okay. I was going to say that would be embarrassing and not good.
No.
I was going to say, so if you do run, put your schedule on the test program, run it for 1 or 2 minutes per station, just start it, and then that way you can visually inspect your irrigation system. What you're looking for when you're running each station is you just want to look, does it look like it has good water pressure? Does it look like it used to? Because chances are if you do have a problem or a leak in the irrigation, you're going to have a low water pressure. Low water pressure, which means those sprinkler heads are not going to pop up. They're not going to be spraying as fully as they should. Here's just a sprinkler head that's not installed in the ground, obviously, but when it's running, you know, the head is pulled up and it's spraying right. If you have a leak, you have low water pressure, maybe that head is just popping up just a little tiny bit because there's a leak underground somewhere. My educated opinion about if you do have a leak in your system right now, chances are it is going to be underground, because I don't think those heads would be holding any water. Ideally, you've had the irrigation system turned off all winter. You've had it off for the winter months because the landscape is not actively growing. So there wouldn't be any water in the sprinkler heads. There might be some residual water sitting in the pipes. If that happened, if it's enough to cause the pipe to bust, you know, during the freezing conditions, I think the main thing you'd be looking for is low water pressure when those heads are running. If you happen to see that maybe the sprinkler head is cracked, maybe water's flowing out near the bottom of it, maybe around the top portion, you might just need to replace the one sprinkler head, but it's hard to tell where the water's coming from. You'll have to dig around to see where the sprinkler head is connected to the pipe. Okay, I think those are the main things I wanted to cover. But visually looking at your water meter is a very important. Knowing how to turn off your water to your house and to your irrigation are extremely important. And I really encourage you to look at that on a pretty regular basis, at the very minimum once a year, just to familiarize yourself and turn the knobs to make sure they're working. And then when you do visually inspect your irrigation system, run that test program or just run each station through one at a time. You don't necessarily have to check every single head. I think the main thing, first off, is just looking for water pressure. Does the water pressure look low? And if it does, that's a real indication of a pipe break somewhere underground. So it might be time to call out a professional irrigation company to come out and look for that. If it is just a crack, that might be just a plain old sprinkler head that you'd have to replace. Might just be the nozzle, which is just the very top part of the sprinkler head. It might be that needs to be replaced. And those are very simple fixes to do yourself. I don't want to take up too much more of the time because I think I've gone to my limit. So I'll answer questions in the chat. I'm going to be here for a while to answer even more questions if necessary. And then I'll hand it back over to Kate.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. That was great. I know I was out in my yard looking for my water meter box as the temperature started dropping to make sure I could turn it off in case I had a pipe break. So appreciate that information.
Sure.
There we go.
Good to go. I always get it wrong. All right. Well, I am the horticulture agent here in Williamson County with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So I'll just give you fair warning. I'm probably not going to be able to hit every single plant that we have that got damaged in the county. So I'm going to try to give you a lot of basic rules for what to do with types of plants. But let's see, I've got, this is one of my Christmas presents. I've got 2 flamingos down my yard. They're Ethel, no, Thelma and Louise, sorry. So I like to put them up here, but my first rule for you is going to be patient. A lot of our plants were dormant and some of them weren't. We're just not going to know the extent of the damage until we start getting spring green up. Camille addressed that when she talked about trees. Things are going to start leafing out mid-March, mid-April, and then we'll know the extent of the damage. And so AgriLife Extension, our group of specialists has started a hashtag on Facebook called Learn to Love Ugly. And I suggest that you just embrace that. I know it's hard for gardeners who love their lawns and their landscapes, but it's going to take a while for us to know exactly what was damaged. All right, so a few things that you want to consider. Typically in a freeze, a south or southwest facing site is going to be more protected. And a north facing site might see more damage. We have those north winds come in. We did have kind of an interesting situation because here in Williamson County on Thursday, when the winter storm started, we got covered in ice. And so that's going to help insulate to some extent some of our plants, all of that ice, and then the snow helped. And I say to some extent because we got well below freezing for several days. And so the cold temperatures did do some damage, but that initial ice storm is going to help protect plants from some of the wind that came through and can dry plants out when temperatures are dropping. Plants use water to help protect themselves. That's why we encourage you to water well before a freeze comes so that the water can help protect the plant. And because we got covered up in ice, that's going to help a little bit. The other good thing is that soil temperatures did not get below freezing, and so that helps a lot of our plants as well. I'll get into some more specifics for that as we go through. I wanted to show you the cold hardiness zones. This is going to be important for you as you try to figure out the cold hardiness of all of your different landscape plants. USDA put this map together. They had one in 1992 and then they revised it a few years ago. So you can go onto their website and put in your zip code and find out what your cold hardiness zone is. So I put the one in for our office here in Georgetown. So we're in zone 8B. That means that our average annual extreme temperature is 15 to 20 degrees. So that's a good thing to know when you're purchasing plants and looking for cold hardiness. Unfortunately, this year we got colder than that. So it's making it a little bit of a challenge. But when you're looking at plants, and if you have specific plants that you're not sure about, I would recommend that you do a little bit of checking on Google or plant books and see if you can find the cold hardiness zone, because that's going to tell you whether or not it could withstand temperatures down to 3 or 4 degrees that we had. So I've put a few examples. The center one, this is a bottle brush plant that I had bought actually a couple weeks before the freeze. I got too excited about warmer temperatures, and you can see on here that the cold hardiness of this plant is down to 0 degrees, so I'm not too worried about it. It's actually done pretty well. I covered it just to make sure, since it was such a new plant, and it's a little bit of damage, but I think it's going to be okay. This tag over here on the left, this is cold hardy down to -40. I think that tag came from somewhere in Oregon. And then when you're looking plants up online, you might find something like this on the right. So a lot of plants in our area may have a cold hardiness like this. So that 8B might be okay in a normal year, but this year was a little bit of a challenge. So I'm going to get into some specifics, types of plants. I'll start with turf grass, and most of our turf grass should be okay. We may see some winter kill, particularly in St. Augustine. It's not hardy as Bermuda and zoysia grass. If you've got St. Augustine, Raleigh is one of our most cold tolerant varieties. This is in turf grass, this is where the soil temperature is going to be really important. It didn't get too far down below freezing, so our turf grasses are going to be okay. Our Bermuda and zoysia grass have both rhizomes and stolons, so they've got, on St. Augustine, you can see those rhizome or the stolons that pop up out of the ground, and you might have to mow over them. That's how the grass spreads. So in Bermuda and zoysia, we've got those underground, which is going to help it to bounce back even faster if there was damage. If you've got a lawn that has a north-facing slope, you might see some more damage, or if you've got a lot of shade, it didn't allow the lawn to warm up when we did get some sun out, that may be a challenge too. But again, most of our turf grass is going to be okay, other than some damage in St. Augustine. And we won't know that until it starts to green up in the spring. It's just going to take a little bit of time. Our specialists have been out looking out in Dallas, and they've started to see some St. Augustine that's been okay. I was out walking in my neighborhood and saw zoysia that is starting to already green up a little bit, especially on the edges where it was meeting the curb, and it's got that warmth right there. So they're starting to green up. We're just going to have to give it time to see what was injured or not. One question that I've been getting a lot is it okay to go ahead and put out pre-emergent control? What if I've missed the window? Typically, we would suggest that if you're trying to prevent weeds from coming up, that you would go ahead and put out pre-emergent this time of year, mid to late February. But this year is going to be the caveat for that. Most of our pre-emergent herbicides are root inhibitors, and they're supposed to be applied to a healthy turf grass. And so since we suspect there will be some cold damage to our turf grasses, it's better not to put out a pre-emergent herbicide that would further injure the roots on our grass. So you're going to have to do it the good old-fashioned method, get out and pull weeds in your lawn. You can use some post-emergent things to spot treat. Just be really careful that you don't damage your grass around it. All right, I wanted to touch on fertilizer too. I've been getting questions of when it's going to be okay, or would it help your lawn to recover if you go ahead and fertilize. And I would say to wait until we've got good active growth. You can see the growth pattern here on our warm season turf grasses. They don't really get going until April. And so our general rule of thumb is to wait until the grass is actively growing and you've been able to mow it twice. And I don't mean you're mowing your ryegrass or your weeds. You need to be mowing actively growing grass 2 times and then fertilize. We do have a soil testing website you can go to download the form to figure out the application rate for the fertilizer that you need. Typically, we're basing that on the amount of nitrogen. That's what's going to help our turf grass to really grow that top growth. So be sure to get a soil test this year to help you figure out what you need to use for fertilizer. Okay, I think this is the slide that everybody's been waiting on. What do you do about your woody shrubs and vines? This is where we're seeing maybe the most painful damage in our landscapes. And honestly, we just aren't going to know for maybe another few weeks. I recommend on woody plants that you wait until they start to resprout, see if they do resprout. This is my spirea plant. I took that picture on Sunday afternoon. You can see that it's already starting to green up a little bit and put on some leaves. A lot of our shrubs should be okay, but just wait until they start coming back out and then prune back the dead stuff until you start getting into live tissue. So you could do a scratch test, which means that you just take your fingernail and kind of scratch on the stem and see if there's any green or live tissue in there. You can just start cutting back slowly from the tips and see what's going to happen. What is a good sign that the shrub is dead is if there's a split stem, and you can see that pretty easily. What happened is a lot of the plants, they may have been protected and then they warmed up and then froze again, and so that's going to cause the bark to split, or that wood to split, and that's going to kill the whole limb back. So you might have to get down in there and look at it, but if you see any splitting, that's a good indication that it's not going to come back. But I would just say be patient on our shrubs and even our vines, because it's going to take some time and some warm temperatures to see what's come back. I've got a few pictures in here. Again, I can't cover every single plant that we've got here in the county, but on the left, you can see the Laura petalum. We're not too sure about that one. It was introduced since we had the last terrible freeze back in '89. It's gotten really popular in the last few years, so it hasn't gone through that kind of cold. It's one that's probably going to see some damage, but we're hoping that it will come back. So just give it some time to see if it's going to leaf out and then prune back what's dead in there. Oleanders are probably dead all the way to the ground, so they may come back from the roots. It's just going to take some time. And then Pittosporum, I'm afraid that depending on where your location is, it's probably not going to make it, and those will not come back from the ground. So if you had it in a protected spot, maybe it's kind of in the corner of a fence line and was really well protected, or underneath something, it might be okay. But for the most part, we don't expect for Pittosporum to make it. Okay, palms. These are another one that we get a lot of questions about. And again, this is where cut it back, cut the dead stuff back, and see what's going to happen. The only palms that survived the bad freezes in the 80s were Mexican or Texas sable palms, Brazoria palm, dwarf palmetto, and some of the windmill palms. So I've been seeing pictures online that people post on Facebook and things like that, that some of these are starting to look okay. So just trim back the dead stuff. What I don't think is going to make it is the sago palm. It's cold hardy if the temperature dips down into the teens, but we had cold for a really long time, for days below freezing. And I don't think that the sago palm is going to come back. If you want to, wait it out. Just cut dead stuff back. It's got that growth point there in the center. If you can get close enough without getting poked by all those fronds, give it a look and see what happens, but I don't think they're going to make it. Okay, perennials. These are two taken from my yard. I've got some catnip and then Jerusalem sage. Both of those are starting to come back from the base. So you might wait just a little bit longer before you start cutting stuff back. If we do have another freeze in the next month, you'll have some protection just from the plant existing, even though it's dead. It's gonna look ugly. Remember, learn to love ugly. But as we get warmer days and nights, that's gonna help these plants come back. So just be patient. They're already starting to leaf out. I took those pictures on Sunday, so there's hope for some perennials, and other stuff we'll just have to take out. Crepe myrtles. I get lots of questions about these. This crepe myrtle, this picture was obviously taken a previous year, but this is an example of what a crepe myrtle will look like when it's had cold damage. You can see that it's leafed out some, but it's got quite a few dead stems up here. And so wait until later in the spring to see what might leaf out, and then you can just cut this dead stuff out. It's going to depend a lot based on which variety you have. Natchez crepe myrtles, the big white ones, are not as cold hardy as some of our other varieties, but if you've got one that doesn't leaf out at all, you might go ahead and just cut it down to the ground and see if it comes back up. The crepe myrtles are somewhat notorious. You can see that this one's got all kinds of shoots coming up from the base. That's how they grow. And so if it dies back all up here, just cut it off and it may come back. There's a great resource at crepemyrtletrails.org. This is a project of McKinney, the city of McKinney, and Neil Sperry. They've cataloged hundreds of different crepe myrtle varieties, and so this is a good website for you to check out the varieties and see what has good cold hardiness. Okay, bulbs. These should be okay. They've got either a bulb or a corm or a rhizome down in the ground. They may have really ugly foliage on top that got burned back, but just cut it off. You may not have many blooms this year, but the plant underground should be fine. You can see that these are my irises in my yard, and they're already starting. I'm trying to look. You can see some new growth down in here, so they'll be okay. Just cut off the ugly stuff. Herbs are going to be a challenge for us this year. This is in our herb garden at the Master Gardener Demonstration Garden out on Interloop, 3151 Southeast Interloop. I've got two pictures here that are really kind of sad. This is our rosemary. Most of the rosemary that I've seen they're toast. They're going to have to be removed. Some of them just got frozen back part way, and you could prune out some stuff, but it's going to be so ugly that I would say just go down to the nursery and buy yourself another $4 little rosemary plant. You can see a lot of our other herbs didn't make it. Most herbs, or a lot of them, come from Mediterranean areas where it's warmer and drier, so rosemary and lavender, and they just can't take this kind of cold. So unfortunately, we may be starting over in our herb gardens. Succulents. These are gonna probably struggle. There are a lot of different types of succulents, agaves, cactus, all different kinds. So I would recommend that you check to see if it's mushy. You can see both of these are pretty mushy. They probably didn't make it. You could, if you've got some stuff down at the base that might be okay, just cut back the mushy stuff and see what comes back. But I don't hold out much hope for a lot of our succulents. Okay, tropicals and citrus. I got this general rule from Greg Grant. He's the horticulture extension agent over in Smith County. He says if the air freezes, the tops die. If the ground or the soil freezes, the whole plant dies on our tropicals and citrus. And so I really recommend that you check the cold hardiness zone for whatever tropical plant that you have. If it's a zone 7 or lower, it might make it, probably survived, but anything else is going to be really iffy. These are Satsuma oranges that are planted out near Taylor. If you've heard of Two Happy Children Farm, They're a great family that sells at our Wolf Ranch Farmers Market. This is a before and after of their Satsuma oranges. So you can see how much they died back from the freeze. Our citrus didn't do very well in this at all. A lot of us have tropicals as houseplants. So if you had something that was in a pot and didn't bring it in, it's probably, not probably, it is dead. If you had a tropical that got left outside. So as you start to replant, I would recommend that you read those cold hardiness labels and look for plants that are going to be able to survive a little bit more cold. Okay, again, be patient, learn to love ugly. It's going to take us several weeks or a month to see what comes back. Don't get in a rush to start pruning things back. Just give them time to see if they can make it. And I've got some ways that you can get more information over the next coming weeks. I do a monthly newsletter you can sign up for on our website. We also have a Master Gardener help desk. That's every Tuesday and Friday from 10 to 2. The best way to get a response is by emailing them at williamsonhelpdesk@ag.tamu.edu. Some of them are working from home on that right now because of COVID, and so you'll get a faster response by email. All right. I think that's the end of my presentation. So I know I covered a lot of different plants very quickly, but we'll try to answer some questions for you. Oh, I will, before we start answering questions, I will tell you that this is recorded and we'll post it on our website. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, I'll also send a link out to the recording that goes out in about a week and a half. So, alrighty.
So there was several questions came about mountain laurels, your comment about mountain laurels, and then viburnums.
Okay, those are two that I think are going to be pretty iffy. Viburnums, we're really on the edge of the cold hardiness zone for viburnums, so I think some of that may depend on your particular location, the microclimate in your yard. Just wait and see if they come back. I think it's going to be tough for viburnums to make it, but maybe they will. And then the mountain laurels are kind of the same. They're more native to areas west of us, and they're struggling. What I've seen a lot on mountain laurels is that the ice that we got on that first Thursday of the freeze broke off a lot of the tops. They get kind of top heavy and they broke. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't ever see them coming up from the roots. Excuse me. Like a crepe myrtle would do. So I don't know if they're going to come back. I'm watching them in my neighborhood a lot to see what happens, but I just don't know. Just keep waiting and see if they leaf out.
On the trees, there was one question about pine trees with brown needles. You got any camilles that you want to comment on those?
Yes, there are a lot of different kind of wood-boring insects that can impact the pine trees. And I would say there are not a lot of native pines to Williamson County. If you go a little bit more east towards Bastrop, you get the loblolly pines. And so a tree, and typically pines don't enjoy the humidity levels, which, it's not the same humidity levels as being at the coast. But those boring insects are a hassle to deal with, and it's possible to get arborists to treat your tree with an insecticide. But that's kind of another layer of stress the tree has to deal with when it's already trying to recover from the stress of the ice storm. So kind of adding these stressors kind of can be exhausting on the tree. So I recommend calling around and seeing if there are any arborists that are in the area that are willing to do an insecticide treatments for wood boring insects in pine trees. And it'll be helpful to know what pine trees you have as well.
And there was a question from the emails earlier about a tree that had broken limbs and then some of the bark had stripped off. Recommendations for that?
Yeah, stripped bark is the biggest stressor again on the trees with ice damage. And so the best thing to do is to make sure that if it's an oak tree, to work on it and do cleaning cuts in July when we're out of the oak wilt transmission zone. If it's a tree other than an oak tree, then just trying to clean up where the bark has stripped and ripped, and making that a clean cut so it doesn't foster insects and it allows the tree to kind of heal and grow over that large wound. But there's really the best thing you can do when you have a large wound is assist the tree, make sure that it's getting enough water and not too much water. Again, adding the mulch and just kind of facilitating the tree's ability to heal itself. So it is an unsightly wound, but pruning sprays on trees other than oaks are not encouraged. And it does not help the tree to add a pruning spray if it's not an oak tree.
Here's a question, and I'm not sure what this is because I'm not familiar with it, but a Kentucky coffee tree. I'm not sure that's a tree or maybe it's like a shrubby bush. I don't know. You know anything about that? It said the leaves turned brown and fell off. Will they come back? And I think you probably the same answer we've been given the whole time. It depends, right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I haven't heard of that one, but I would say wait and see. Some of our horticulture specialists are saying it's a good sign if the leaves fall off because that means maybe healthy growth is pushing them off, which is just part of the process. So I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
There was quite a few questions about lilies and irises and that, and I think you basically covered that, but probably no flowers, but maybe they'll survive.
Right. Yeah. They've got either a bulb in the ground or corm or rhizome, which is a good source of energy for them. So those should be okay. If they already we're starting to bud this year, that's going to be frozen and they're not going to bloom, but they should be okay. Just cut off the ugly stuff. I've seen a few questions on here about natives. I didn't cover plants that are native to our area because they're native and they should be genetically engineered to survive this kind of a freeze because it happens periodically. And so those should be okay, but a good plug for buying native plants in your landscape moving forward is they're going to be more able to survive a freeze like this. So,
what about fern, holly fern?
Ferns that's tricky to answer. I just bought a couple different kinds of ferns for my backyard, and some of those go down to 0 degrees on their cold hardiness. But I've got I think they're Boston ferns that I have in hanging pots, and I brought those in to protect them because those won't take much cold at all. So it's going to depend a little bit on what type of fern you've got.
What about rose bushes?
Rose bushes should be okay. A lot of them. Just wait and see what comes out. They should start leafing out pretty quick. And then just cut back any dead stuff that's on them. We've got so many varieties of roses that it's going to be hard to address each one, but just wait and see what comes out this year. And then
another good tip for kind of examining your woody species is you can take a pocket knife and kind of scrape away the bark into the soft sapwood, and you can maybe examine the pith a little bit. And it's kind of hard to tell if you're not familiar with that practice, but if you can see living tissue or green sapwood in that exposed area, you just want to make a little tiny scratch. You don't want to make a big long wound. You can kind of examine the internal area of those woody species, and you may be able to tell the difference on the tip that was kind of exposed versus the ones that were maybe more protected towards the bottom. You could take a look and see if you think that that your woody species is alive from there. And I think we'll be really pleasantly surprised with what does survive. It looks really devastating right now, but I know I was surprised that my uncovered romaine lettuce, I cut it all the way back and it's returned. The rootstock was not dead. And, you know, I was extremely pleasantly surprised. So
Yeah,
patience is really the key here.
impressive. If you're on that, if you start, you know, take your pruning shears and just start at the tip and cut back too, then you can see that cross section, which can help too. If you already do the scratch test like Camille was talking about, both are really good ways to see if there's any living tissue down in there. Okay. I know we've got lots of questions in the chat. I don't know that we can even begin to answer all these specific questions. I'm really sorry. I do encourage you to follow us on Facebook, because we've got our iPhones and we're going to be out taking pictures of what's starting to come back. We'll try to post some videos of how to check to see if things are going to live, and then maybe some tips on pruning things back and how far you should prune. So watch us on social media, keep checking our website. I'll post this video so that you can come back and watch it or share it. And you can also sign up for the newsletter. We'll have more information there.
Hey, just let me butt in really fast.
You
There's
bet.
more people that also asked, were asking about those 2 little videos that I showed. Is it possible for me to share those with you to post on the website as well?
Absolutely.
And is that the county's website, Williamson County website, AgriLife?
Yeah, it's williamson.agrilife.org.
Okay.
We'll be on there, and I can send everybody who registered, I'll send you an email with links to all of this information that you can find. That may be the easiest way to make sure everybody gets it. We'll just send you an email. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, give us a call if we can help you. The Master Gardener Help Desk is here. I'm here. Lots of resources available online, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Bet.